Another edition of Texas Book Festival's Literary Lunch Break. Today we are talking to author Paul Coggins, who will be joining us here in a couple of minutes. Oh, there he is. Let's get him added. Just waiting for it to load. Paul will be here in a second. Oh, there we are. Hi.
Good afternoon, Katie.
How are you?
Doing great.
Yeah, all things considered, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Inside
always
the
feel weird
library.
asking. I
Yeah.
always feel weird asking people how they are because it's like, how are any of us doing?
Well, nice day in Dallas for walking outside.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice in Austin as well. Not too terribly hot, which is,
Exactly.
that's a win for me this time of year. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna read a short little bio, and then we'll get to talking about your book. So
Perfect.
Paul is a nationally recognized criminal defense attorney whose clients have included high-ranking politicians, Fortune 500 executives, professional athletes, nonprofits, and government bodies. Paul's a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Texas, and you are the president or the president-elect. I'm not sure how old your bio was of the.
Yeah, I'm the president this year. The bio, I was president-elect when I submitted it. I'm president this year.
Gotcha.
National
Okay.
Association of Former U.S. Attorneys.
Yeah, exactly. And you're the author of now two thrillers, and the co-author of a book about college athletics. So a man of many talents, evidently.
Well, the writing is the fun part, but the law pays the bills, so it's both. It's all good.
Yeah. And so for those of you watching, you can see Paul's book behind him, very beautifully displayed. I just have a digital copy, so I'm not able to hold it up. So glad you have it. We can all look at it. So Paul's book, Sting Like a Butterfly, came out in March. And Paul, do you want to tell those of us who, full disclosure, I'm only halfway through. So we're going to try to keep this conversation relatively spoiler free for the folks who may not have read the book yet, or like me, who is very close to being done. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the plot and just the book in general?
Sure. The setup of the book is we have a very well-known criminal defense lawyer who's made a lot of enemies in law enforcement, who finds himself through some fault of his own in a federal prison where he has ex-clients, where he has a lot of people who are not happy with his services. So the setup is he's got to figure out how to get out of federal prison, where he's got a 5-year term, and who set him up and why. And his work as a jailhouse lawyer, unfortunately, puts him in contact with a cartel. And so the deeper he gets in that cartel, the more trouble he has. I like to say it's a John Grisham setup, but I hope it has a touch of Elmore Leonard to it as well.
Yeah, that's very much. I was just telling my fiance about the book, and I actually took this this class in college on like hard-boiled detective novels, and this feels so much like those types of book. It's got this like old school kind of like bad boy character. And do you read a lot of those novels? Were you inspired by those authors?
Totally inspired by those authors. I used to read only the classics, and had a great friend named Dick Stark who unloaded all his murder mysteries on me. I pushed them off. I got hooked. And so, I've read all the McDonald's, Greg McDonald, Ross McDonald, John D. McDonald. I've got into Elmore Leonard, Michael Conley. Those are the books I gravitate to. And so I love those books. And of course, Sherlock Holmes is a mainstay for me. So I tried to make it where the good guys aren't all that terribly good and the bad guys aren't completely bad. So they kind of meet in the center of this book.
Yeah. That was actually the next thing I wanted to talk about is, this is definitely one of those stories where the main character, you're not really sure if he's a good person or not, or even if you like him very much, but you find yourself rooting for him to win, whatever that looks like, and sometimes rooting against him, but I feel like I'm rooting for him, even if what he's up to isn't always on the up and up. So let's talk a little bit about, tell us a little bit about that, what it's like writing a character like that you kind of have this like push and pull like moral battle with, and about his journey, you know, throughout the book, and this complicated character that is the book is centered around.
Well, that's really perceptive, because you want to have a character who is complicated and who, first of all, he's got to be good at his job. I mean, you know, you don't want to write about somebody. We like people who are good at their jobs, whether they're book editors, whether they're authors, whether they're doctors, and he's good at his job. He's not so good at his life, and that's what keeps getting him in trouble. But you don't want him so bad. I mean, he's got people around him. He doesn't really have a family as such, so he creates a family with his secretary slash paralegal slash assistant, his mentor. And I think this character comes off as one I hope that you root for, even though you're kind of closing your eyes when he's getting into some of the messes he gets into.
Yeah, exactly. It almost creates this like guilty feeling as a reader sometimes that you're wanting this person to win, but you kind of develop this soft spot for them. And I always enjoy reading books like that, instead, like, rather than ones where everything's kind of neatly tied up. So
well, and I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a defense lawyer. I do white collar work. I do tax cases, securities cases, those kind of things. I would never in a million years work for a drug cartel. In fact, I remember I had one of the assistant U.S. attorneys I hired who went into private practice, and he got in a cartel case. And I picked up the phone and called him and said, "Are you insane for taking this case?" It was tried, by the way, in Austin. So, you know, this character walks that line. He gets very, very close to the cartel. In fact, gets a little bit over the line for the cartel, which is a very dangerous place to be.
yeah, it's you know, that kind of segues into my next question perfectly, which is, you know, this is very much, you know, like a book, you know, as much as it is about this character, it's a book about the legal system and how it works. And a lot of us, I mean, me particularly, I don't know a lot about that world. So can you tell me kind of what it's like for you to try to, you know, explain these like complicated legal, or sometimes complicated legal things, or, you know, very like what could be inside baseball, but making it appealing to a broader audience, people who may not know a lot about the law world or about crime or anything like that. Like, what's it like for you as the author to kind of decode and detangle those things so that people like me can understand them?
Yeah, I really strive to do that. I wanted people to learn a little bit about this area of the law that we hope you never encounter. You never want to be in the situation where you have to have a criminal defense lawyer.
Right. It's probably good that I don't know a lot about this.
It's probably
right?
good you don't know a lot about it. It's just good things about you, Katie. But, you know, if you did get in that, you want somebody like Cash McCahill, my character, somebody who will fight for you, someone who has your interest at heart. And so I created a system because I saw that system when I was a prosecutor. I still see it as a defense lawyer. There are occasionally defense lawyers who are noted not because they fight for their client, but because they're there to keep their clients quiet. You know, they're being paid off by somebody else. And so those are sort of the bad guys in the book. Cash McCahill is a charismatic figure, one we like and gravitate toward, precisely because he does fight for his client, and he's almost always the underdog. Now, you could write a great novel, and great novels have been written about prosecutors, and so I have all sorts of prosecutors littered into this, but this defense lawyer is not patterned on any particular person. He's composite of a lot of defense lawyers I've known throughout my career, many of whom have gotten in trouble, have had their bar cards pulled, and not prosecuted as much, but lost the ability to go in court for long stretches.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's like one of the reasons that you kind of start to root for Cash is he's nothing if not passionate. You know, you're not always sure if he's doing the right thing, but it's clear that he cares a lot, and I think that makes him, you know, a sympathetic character in that way. So
but Katie, let me follow up with your question, because it's a great question. Because when you write one of these legal thrillers, you want to tell the reader something that he or she doesn't know. You want to give them some bits of information. You don't want to make it over technical. It shouldn't read like a criminal law 101. And so I'm very fortunate. I'm with a writers group. I'm very fortunate. I've got an editor that I work with. In fact, she's in Austin before I even submit it to my agent. And sometimes they're telling me, too technical. I don't understand this. And so there is kind of a give and take. You want it to educate the reader some, but not come off as didactic.
Yeah, yeah, and I've definitely read, not necessarily books about, not like court dramas or law-oriented books like this, but I've definitely read books that are about very niche industries that I know nothing about, that I'm like, I should just skip this page entirely because this is not for me. And I haven't had that experience at all with yours. Like, it's very it translates really well to people like me who are relatively clueless about this stuff. For anyone watching who is worried about that, not a problem. So you said
The
that,
ultimate lesson you want to take from the book is that be sure when you hire a lawyer, that lawyer has your interest at heart. And if you
exactly.
ever, I always tell clients this, if you ever reach the point where you don't trust your lawyer, you got the wrong lawyer.
Yeah, that seems like a great lesson.
Right.
Hopefully that none of us ever have to use. But so you said that Cash is sort of this, your lead character Cash is sort of this combination of a bunch of people who you've experienced throughout your career. Do you ever like include specific tidbits from cases you've worked or people you've worked? Like, do you ever see something in your day-to-day law career where you're like, oh, I have to include that in my next story or my next book? Like, is there any elements of this that are inspired by true events?
A lot of it's inspired by true events. A lot of it's inspired by being in the trenches, either with or against lawyers, and seeing, how they landed like cats on their feet when it looked like it was over for them. I will say this though, Katie, and you know this, probably dealing with other authors, the one thing you can't do is include some of the outlandish, wild things that have happened in my life, because no reader would believe it. I mean, I've had, they always say that the reader will believe any coincidence if it cuts against the main character, but will disbelieve any coincidence that cuts in favor of the main character. I totally believe that. So there have been coincidences that I can't include in this book because a reader would say, this is absurd. This could never happen in real life, even though it happened in real life.
Yeah.
So I think I have to dial back the reality sometime to make it believable fiction.
Yeah, true life is stranger than fiction, as they
Way
say. I
more.
feel like we all
Way more.
experience that, especially right now.
Yes.
I feel like any books written about this strange period that we're living in, future generations will be like, that can't be what really happened when when it was.
Yeah, and you do wonder if this is going to change fiction. I mean, what we're going through, how will it change fiction? If it will change fiction, the way like the cell phone has changed, what writers can get away with, what mystery writers can get away with. Because you had all sorts of incidents in the past where the main character couldn't get in touch with someone because they were away from a phone. Well, nowadays that's less believable.
Yeah. Yeah, and reading older books, whether they're mystery or crime novels or other types, or watching TV shows, and you're like, that would never happen today because we have the internet. Like, there's entire seasons of TV shows or entire novels that are so unbelievable now because you're like, well, you could just call that person and
Exactly.
find them. or
No
like reading about old crimes that happened like before DNA technology. Was it like these murderers that got away with stuff, and you're like, well, that would never happen now because they left their blood everywhere and they'd find him the next day. So
yeah, that's why the setup, I had to be awfully careful. I wanted Cash. He had to go to prison. He had to he really starts, there's no spoiler here. That's where it starts out.
yeah, you hit the ground running.
You're right there in a prison with him. And I had to have the setup believable. He got set up and he doesn't know who did it. He doesn't know why they did it. He's got a suspicion and he's got to follow that through.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely, I mean, I wasn't expecting, when I started reading the book, I wasn't expecting us to like immediately jump in there. So I think it was like such an interesting way to start the book because you're like, well, now I got to figure out how this happened. How did we get here? So super.
And of course, I had to leave a hook at the end. So you're not at the end yet.
Yeah, I
but
haven't gotten there yet.
There's an unfinished hook at the end and that's book 2, which I've already
Ooh.
wrapped and got that to my agent. So, and I'm hard at work at book 3, about 65 pages into book 3. So it's a 4-book arc, and each end leaves a hook to be solved in the next book.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more of Cash for sure, and seeing what kind of shenanigans he gets himself into next. But you know, we're almost at the end of our time together, so I wanted to ask you the question I've been asking everyone, which is, what are you reading right now? What's catching your interest in these strange times?
Oh man, I picked up a book I've been meaning to read forever, Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian,
Ooh.
which is celebrating its 25th anniversary. So it's not a murder mystery, but it's I'm a Cormac McCarthy fan, and so this is one that I hadn't read. I probably read half a dozen of his books, and it's got that Cormac McCarthy touch. There's a lot of blood. There's a lot of guts. It takes a strong stomach to get through those things, but he's a heck of a writer.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a lot of people have kind of been returning to older literature a
Yes.
lot these days.
I don't know why I decided to pick it up. It's just one, like I said, it's one I've read, I've heard a lot about. Just like I'm a member of a writers group, I mentioned to you, I'm a member of a book club. And in fact, a lot of the writers that I learn about, that I follow, I met at the Texas Book Festival, which we've been coming to for years. And like I said, it's to me one of the great things about our state is the Texas Book Festival. So I really salute you and Lois and the group that puts it together. I don't know what's going to happen this year, but we'll be with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Either
Lois
in
is in the
person or in
comments.
spirit or virtually. One way or another, we're going to be with you.
Lois is in the comments sending us hard eyes, so I think she's happy to hear that. So thank
Yeah.
you for those kind words. But yeah, that's about all we have for today. Thank
Well,
you so
thank you
much
so
for
much.